Clairaudience, hearing spirit. What does that actually sound like? Is it your own inner reading voice? Is it something you're supposed to hear externally? And what are the actual signs that it's happening for you? Well, that's what we're talking about on this episode, where I'm going to help you understand the signs that your clairaudience is coming online. So stay tuned. Welcome to Spiritual and Ambitious. I'm your host, Whitney McNeill. I'm a certified medium and spiritual teacher, and I help spiritual and ambitious souls just like you live your life purpose through your career and attract abundance by connecting into your intuition and spirit guides. Let's get spiritual and ambitious. Welcome to another episode of the Spiritual and Ambitious podcast. Last week, I helped you understand how to know the signs that your clairvoyance was waking up. And this episode, I'm talking about how to understand the signs that your clairaudience is coming online. So for me, clairaudience is the last of my intuitive languages, not the last of the episodes, but the last of my primary intuitive languages. So my primary intuitive languages go like this: clairvoyance, which is seeing spirit, then claircognizance, which is knowing, clairsentience, feeling, clairaudience, which is hearing. And it's different for every single person. Now, the fun fact that I have is that clairaudience, if that is your primary intuitive language, you are a very rare person. It is actually the rarest for clairaudience to be your primary. So a lot of times people have it just as a complementary one in their second, third, or maybe fourth, but rare if it's just your primary one. So my husband definitely has clairaudience as one of his top ones. I have students that are the same. And let's go ahead and get into it. So what is clairaudience? Well, it is hearing spirit. It is hearing messages with your intuition. And one of the big questions, is this going to sound like a booming voice coming from the sky? Not most of the time. Not most of the time. I'm saying not. So I hope you got that. Normally, clairaudience actually sounds like your own inner reading voice. So if you're reading yourself a book, if you're reading to yourself silently, there's usually a voice that you hear in your head that usually sounds like your own voice. Now, if that doesn't happen to you, just imagine that your own voice is talking to you, like talking to yourself in your mind. That's usually what it sounds like. And so that's what usually trips people up. They're like, I don't know. Did I make it up in my head? Or, what is that? So practice, doing exercises, all those things. It takes some time to trust. It's not a magical overnight fix. And I'm not going to get into it in this episode, but I want to get into the signs. So how do you know your clairaudience is even happening? Well, one of the physical symptoms, and by the way, please check with your doctor if you have any of these symptoms, because this could be a medical thing. And please, this podcast episode is not meant to be any kind of replacement from your doctor. It is not meant to be any kind of medical advice. But what I do see, so our clairaudience center is the third eye. The third eye is also the same center for clairvoyance. And so when we are working on our clairaudience, hearing spirit, normally this chakra, this energy is starting to expand and be used more than it has before. And so you could imagine like a balloon inside expanding that energy. And when that happens, a lot of times we'll feel pressure. We'll feel pressure in our ears. We'll feel like our ears are kind of achy a little bit, or we feel like they're muffled a little bit. And then all of a sudden, it's almost like the airway kind of opens and we are able to hear. Now, obviously, these things I'm saying can be a physical symptom you need to get looked at. But energetically speaking, if you are a sensitive person and you're becoming more sensitive, then you're also going to become more sensitive to energy, which is what I'm talking about here today. So one of the most common symptoms that happens is your ear can ring when you're talking. And let's say you're thinking about something, maybe you're asking your spirit guides about something, and all of a sudden your ear starts to ring. And Okay, spirit wants me to pay attention to that. I was just having a conversation with my husband a couple nights ago, and he was getting ready to do something for work he had never done before. And he was coming up with some ideas about it. And all of a sudden, his ears started ringing. And he said, "Oh, okay. I know that that means that's a good thing." Right now, I'm not going to get into what to do when your ears ring. I just want you to be aware that a lot of times that is the common symptom. And sometimes you might hear like a little bell ring or a buzzing sensation or something else. I know that some people will hear birds chirping and there's no bird there. So just know if you're hearing things that aren't necessarily the norm, and if you are intending for your clairaudience to open, this could be something that happens. But please check with your doctor if you are hearing voices or things like that. Now, another thing that you'll start to notice when your clairaudience is coming online is that you probably are going to talk to yourself more. And this is a symptom that you'll probably think, Whitney, that's not even anything to do with clairaudience, but it is. It's because you need to hear the voice vibration of your own self in order to process the information. And the way that we process information is 100% linked to our intuition, because our intuition is this process where we are receiving information from our spirit guides and we are receiving information from our environment, from the universe. So, of course, if we are processing information intuitively this way, we are going to process information physically this way as well. You might start to listen to more podcasts, audiobooks, but especially when you're talking out loud to yourself, you need to hear it to help yourself process. That is a sign that not a lot of people know. And knowing that your music tastes might be changing as well as the volume of your music. So you may not be able to go to concerts anymore. You might start to really need to turn down the volume. You might need to really listen to a different kind of tone. So just notice as some of these things are happening for you because your sounds are becoming more sensitive. You're becoming more sensitive to the nuances in people's voices, the vibration in people's voices, and the notes and the melodies and things like that. So, what I used to be able to tolerate before, I'm not able to tolerate now. And it can shift and it can change. And because your sounds are becoming more sensitive, that means your ears, the way that you're hearing things, are more sensitive. You're probably going to hear every little pop and crack in the house. You're probably going to hear things that you never heard before. And just know that this is part of the process. It is if you are growing bigger ears, but not really. I'm just saying that as a metaphor. It is an interesting energy that occurs where you start hearing things, and it's almost like, wait a minute, my hearing got way better. How did this happen here? All right, when we come back from this quick break, I'm going to talk more about the energetic signs that your clairaudience is coming online and opening up. This episode is sponsored by my free Spirit Guide Masterclass. Inside, you'll learn the 5 C's of Spirit Guide communication, your role with your Spirit Guides, 2 proven effective strategies to stop second guessing yourself and your intuition, and the single most important step to understand your intuitive guidance, along with 4 ways to perceive your spiritual intuitive messages. You'll also be getting a workbook to go through this class as well. You can join at messengerofspirit.com/free class. Welcome back. We've been talking about signs that your clairaudience is opening, and we've talked a lot about the physical symptoms, the symptoms that a lot of people just kind of slough off or never would connect to their clairaudience. But now let's talk about the energy part of it. Well, when you are receiving messages from spirit or you are asking questions, to yourself or to your spirit guides, one of the common signs that happens when your clairaudience starts to wake up is hearing whispers. Very light, very quick, inaudible, like, what was that? And when you're hearing things, it happens really fast. So you might be saying, I wonder if I should, and all of a sudden you hear a yes or a no. And those can be louder. Usually our yeses and nos are pretty audible, but not always. But sometimes you might hear something like, "Psst, psst, psst, psst," and you are going, "Well, what was that? Was that a mouse? What was it?" And so you can just take a moment and say, "I heard something. I would really love to know what that meant." So when you are coming online with your clairaudience, notice that these messages come in quick and oftentimes interrupt you. Why do they interrupt you? Because spirit is fast. And if you are asking a question or coming up with an idea or you have a thought, before you can actually speak it or process it through your brain, it's already out there in the energy field. So your spirit guides are already answering you before you have finished this thought or question. And that is why they're not trying to be rude. They're just immediately responding to you. And that's a great validation that it is coming from your clairaudient center because you didn't even finish it and you got your answer already. But sometimes it's not even answers, it's just whispers that you're hearing. And sometimes we really expect that with our clairaudience, it's going to be this big, booming, loud voice. And it can be, but it's usually not. So know that whispers usually happen. And normally, the way your messages come in, it's like you're talking to yourself in your mind and you are wondering if you made it up or, wait a minute, was that me just talking to myself? No, especially when the message comes in so fast, there's no way that your brain can be thinking about two things at once in the same line. So just know that when the messages come in, they usually come in as whispers. They usually come in very soft. They're usually, if they're not soft, sounding like your own voice. And so very rarely does it sound like a big booming voice, but it can, which brings me to my next sign your clairaudience is coming online, is sometimes you will hear outside sounds. So I alluded to this with animals or birds chirping, but you can also hear the TV on. Like the TV is on and it's not on. So you're going, what in the heck, is going on here? Like, I don't get it. What am I hearing? Well, sometimes your sensitivity, psychically, intuitively, can be so heightened, you might be able to be picking up on somebody else's conversation down the hall, which we don't want to do. We're not trying to do. We're being in an ethical kind of place. But most of the time, you're hearing a spirit conversation or you're hearing energy that exists in a different, let's say, reality. So understanding that, oh my gosh, the TV's on, and then you look at the TV and it's not, or you hear a conversation happening and maybe you feel like it's your neighbors outside and you look around and your neighbors aren't there. That is something that can happen when you are developing your clairaudience. When I was developing mine, I heard phones ringing and it was so real. I was looking for the phone and then I realized I do not have a landline phone. And that ring was from a landline phone. Now, what was I picking up on? Who knows? At the moment and reflecting back on it, I think it was more of spirit testing, like, hey, we're just testing to make sure your clairaudience is on. But it also could have been me picking up on something that happened inside the house before I had moved in when this person had a phone. So just know that when your clairaudience is opening, it's not necessarily going to make sense all the time. Think about it as I'm just going to appreciate the understanding that I'm hearing these things and tell my spirit guides that I can hear it. And then I can work with my spirit guides to make it even better, to make it more audible, and those kind of things. So sometimes it can sound like that as well. And then finally, I want to just say when you are dreaming and you come up from the dream state, you can remember more clearly what people said to you. And sometimes you will wake yourself up in the middle of the night for a variety of reasons. One being you yourself are talking out loud. That is a sign your clairaudience is becoming more aware because you're really being communicative. And so communication is listening and also speaking. But oftentimes, the main reason when we're waking up is we're hearing sounds and we're hearing our names being called or somebody talking to us. And I've said this story on the podcast before, but I'm going to say it again. My husband and I were sleeping and we heard a man in the hallway sneeze and we both woke up. It was so close. Nobody was there. So just know that it doesn't always have to make sense. It is more of an awareness that these things are occurring for you. And if you're in a place that has a lot of history and there is, let's say, a lot of psychic phenomena that occurs where there is an event that kind of replays over and over, like an energy, well, then you might be able to hear something coming from there too. So let's say you live close to an old battlefield or you were close to a place where there was an explosion, you might hear an explosion and those kind of things. So while this episode is not meant to scare you with that, I'm just trying to give you some examples of why you might be hearing things. Regardless, talk to your spirit guides and let them know that you are hearing it so that they can then work with you on it as well. So if your clairaudience is your primary language, again, congrats. You are one of the rare people where clairaudience is your main language. But if your clairaudience is not developed or is a supporting intuitive language and you have another primary one, then this is going to help you just understand what it's like when it happens. And I encourage all of my students to develop all of the intuitive languages because they change and shift as you grow spiritually, as you grow as a human, and as you grow energetically. We never stay the same. And so that means our sensitivity and our energy doesn't stay the same either. We have to stay aligned and continue to do exercises to maintain our intuitive languages. And if you're interested in learning more about your clairaudience, then you definitely want to be doing some exercises to strengthen that as well. So I'm going to invite you again to my free spirit guide class where we're going to talk a little bit more about the different intuitive languages. But honestly, our main purpose here is, okay, now that I'm aware, like, how do I develop my intuition? How do I develop this skill set that I have to actually understand what the heck my spirit guides are saying? So check the link in the show notes to register for the class, or you can just go to messengerofspirit.com/class. It's coming up. And I'm going to be back next week with a brand new episode. But until then, here's to staying spiritual and ambitious. Thanks so much for listening to this episode. And if you loved it, would you please share it with a friend? I would also love your review. And a reminder to subscribe so you never miss an episode. You can find me at messengerofspirit.com. And you can take the 4 Intuitive Languages quiz and find show notes there too. If you want to connect on YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram, you can find me at Messenger of Spirit. I'll meet you right here next week. Here's to staying spiritual and ambitious.
This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM. Women's voices amplified.